For the past 3.5 months, our Smittybilt rooftop tent has been our home on the road as we've explored back roads, national parks, and natural wonders. Without a doubt, the most common questions we get are about this rooftop tent. How does it set up? How do you get into it? How do you take it down? Is it comfortable? Is it durable? What about the rain? And on and on and on. So hopefully this video is going to answer some of those questions. Today, I'm going to do a long-term review of our Smittybilt rooftop tent. We've had this thing for about 3.5 months, which you might not think is long enough to call a long-term review, but it's been on the car for the entire time. We've covered 13 states, a little over 12,000 miles. We've slept in it for over 100 nights. And so we've got a pretty good feel on how this thing works. So we'll go through the pros and cons. First, let's unpack it. The heavy-duty PVC cover is one of the tent's best features. It does a great job of keeping out water, mud, and dust, and has the added benefit of killing millions of bugs as you're driving down the road. The front of this cover, it can get pretty disgusting. The setup of the tent, it's pretty quick and easy. Just remove the cover, open up the Velcro straps, then slide out the ladder, lock the ladder pins in place, then use the ladder as leverage and open up the tent. One of the things that makes the setup so quick is that all of your bedding can stay inside the tent when it's folded up. Sleeping bags, pillows, blankets, no problem. After the tent's unfolded, the next step is to put in the tent poles. Depending on the weather conditions and temperature outside, you can put in as many or as little of the tent poles as needed. On especially cold or stormy nights, these 2 poles were all that we'd use, just to give us as much protection from the elements as possible. The first few times we set up this tent, these poles seemed like a serious pain in the butt. But once you figure out the tricks, they're pretty simple. The biggest trick to installing the poles is to use a little muscle. They're meant to bend. So put your back into it and then shove them in the hole. The total setup time, now that we've had quite a bit of practice, is just over 3 minutes. And it's even faster when both of us are working on it. What are the benefits of this thing? Well, first of all, it sets up super fast. In the 3.5 month road trip we just finished, we had a friend traveling with us for about a month who slept in a normal old tent on the ground. In the time we could set up the rooftop tent and have the whole camp set up with a kitchen, table, chairs, blah, 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 he was still putting his tent together. So it's fast. Second big benefit, you don't have to sleep on the ground. With all the rocks and the sticks poking in your back, it's comfy. And everybody likes to be comfy, especially me. Third thing, since you're up on top of the roof, the critters aren't going to get you. Everybody knows bears can't climb ladders. But they can, actually. They really can. Number 4, if you can find a place to park, you can camp. Since the tent's on top of the car, as long as the car fits, basically the tent fits. You don't need to find another spot out in the woods that's flat and level. And getting into the tent, well, that's easy too. It's just like climbing a ladder. And now that we're inside, let's talk about some of the features. There's plenty of ventilation. A hot day. Open all this up. Got skylights on the ceiling for those nice starry nights. You can open this up, take the rain fly off, and you can see the stars. It's pretty amazing. There's lots of pockets all around, so you can store headlamps, keys, little doodads, whatever you like. As far as build quality goes with this thing, it's pretty darn good. You can actually see all the seams are taped, which really helps with rain. We've had 0 leak issues, and we've actually been out in a few rainstorms with the rain fly off. The zippers have all been great. The screens are pretty heavy, but fine at the same time, so we've had no real bug issues. It does its job. One of the other cool things about this tent, which I think most of these rooftop tents has, is these little straps. So when you're climbing in and out of the tent, you got something to hang on to. Yeah, it's pretty good. The only real trouble we've had has been Velcro. It seems like all of the Velcro all around the tent has been coming apart at the stitching and fraying since just about day one. But it got us through 12,000 miles, and now that we're back, it should be a fairly easy fix. So I'm going to actually talk about a couple of cons. They're, depending on how you're going to use this thing, they may or may not matter to you. Since we've stayed in this thing on some sub-freezing temperatures, at pretty high elevations, we were up at about 10,000 feet in the Rocky Mountain National Park, or just outside of the national park. And it was below freezing. We woke up with ice on the inside of the tent. It was cold. There are these ventilation pockets, one on each side of the tent. But when it's cold out and you keep everything closed up, those don't really keep up with condensation. So on a really cold night, it actually is warmer in here if you open up just a little bit, just to keep the airflow and keep it a little less damp in here. This Smittybilt rooftop tent comes with a 2-inch foam mattress pad. It's roughly the same size as a queen size bed, a little longer, but as far as width, it's roughly the same size. And if you're going out for weekend kind of trips, it's more than adequate. Since we were going out for about 3.5 months on the road, we needed a little more comfort. We added this memory foam from Costco. It's 1.5 inches, and it helped quite a bit. Without it, you can definitely feel the deck underneath. The other thing we did after we'd spent quite a few nights in sub-freezing temperature, the big problem we had is that you could feel the cold from underneath. So we just went back to good old Walmart, picked up a couple of cheap camping pads, and slid them underneath the mattress. After we put those camping pads in underneath the foam mattress, all of a sudden this thing in the winter or in cold temperatures was really comfortable. Vent the sides, get a little airflow so condensation wasn't a problem, and I think this is a 4-season tent. To pack up the tent, it's basically a reverse of the setup. Remove the tent poles, then close all the flaps and fold her up. After the tent's folded, open up the locking pins on the ladder, slide the ladder closed, and then strap it down. What'll make this a lot easier when you're folding it up and putting it away is to make sure all of this is tucked in. It just makes putting the cover on quite a bit easier. After you've tucked in all the loose fabric all the way around the tent, then use the Velcro straps to lock it down. After it's locked down, next comes the hardest part of the whole process, and that is just getting the cover on top of the car. And if you're lucky enough to get the cover on the car, take your time and line it up because it's a pretty snug fit. It only really goes on one way. And like I said before, the cover is super durable and does a great job of keeping the tent protected. The total time to pack up the tent is just under 5 minutes. And again, the hardest part is just screwing around with the cover. So obviously there's going to be some downsides. Nothing's ever perfect. The biggest thing on the downside list is every time you go somewhere you got to pack up, fold up the tent before you can leave. For us that wasn't a big problem because basically every day we go someplace new. In 3.5 months almost every day we were in a new spot, so it was no big deal. It's part of our daily routine. Second big problem, in a windstorm, it's horrendous. That thing shakes around like crazy. You're on top of the car, you get more wind. It wasn't great. We actually hated it on a windstorm. But little tricks you can do, you can take off the rain fly, and that actually sort of smoothed it out. It wasn't quite as noisy. Another big problem with it, since it's on top of the car and it's a big block up there, you got some windage going down the road. Driving around with this thing up on the car, normal everyday driving, don't even notice it. It's not all that heavy. It's less than 100 pounds, I believe. Don't remember exactly. Off-road, we sort of forgot it was even there. It went everywhere we did and never complained once. Above 70 miles an hour on the highway, you start to feel this thing, at least in our car. This little Ford Explorer doesn't quite have enough oomph to really push much faster than that. If there's not a lot of headwind or we got a tailwind going downhill, on the interstate we can get 80 miles an hour. In a headwind, forget about it. It ain't happening. It just doesn't have enough power to push this big old block through the wind. And even more than that, we start to notice gas mileage above 70 miles an hour drop fast. If you're concerned about your gas mileage, this is going to take a little hit with one of these things. It's not terrible. Again, in normal everyday driving, you don't really notice it, but on the highway, going fast, it's going to affect everything. So I guess the big conclusion, after 3.5 months with it on the road, in just about every condition you could think of, ice, snow, rain, intense heat, would we do it again? Yeah, it was great. It worked out pretty well. We got to a lot of places we couldn't have gone with a truck camper or a travel trailer, and that was the whole point, to get out there. So if you want to see some of the places we went to with this thing, you can click on the subscribe button, see where we went. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And that's it. The tent is awesome.